Hey, welcome back everybody to this part 2 of our series how to create a Twitter app with Framework 7, VueJS, PhoneGap and Webpack. In this part we are going to use the Twitter authentication API to actually log in our users. As you can remember, in the last part we didn't actually log in because we were just using the search API, and for search you don't need to be logged in. But if you want to actually create a new tweet and send it out into the world, or if you want to fetch your own timeline, you need to be logged in. So that's what we're going to do in this episode. So let's dive directly into the code. Here you can see the code that we have created in part 1 of our series. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, I highly recommend to see it first. Otherwise, let's start. Now, before we start with the authentication to Twitter, I first want to fix some minor issues that we have with our code. Let's have a look into the home.vue file. And as you remember, we had two functions here. One which is addData, which modifies our tweet models so they can better bound to our Vue.js components, and a function type dateDiff. Now, this is a pretty ugly way to do what we actually want to do, and I found a better way to do this using filters. So I want to do that first and get rid of this addData function, and also want to move this dateDiff function to an own module, a utility module. So let's begin. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new utility module. I'll call this util. And create the module and export it. All right. Now I'm just gonna take my dateDiff function, cut it, paste it in here. And that's it. All right, next let's take care of our addData function. I'm going to do the same thing. I create a new file, and this time I'm going to call it filters. Same thing, cut it, and paste it. Now, what a filter basically does is it takes the data that we pass into our Vue.js components, and it does some changes to it. It pretty much does what our addData function does, but in a much more elegant way. So what we do is, for example, this media part, we pass in our tweet, and then we type a pipe. Now this pipe shows Vue.js that we want to use a filter. And in this case, we're just going to call our filter image filter. And we do the same for a user. And for the subtitle, actually, yeah, we're going to call this one screen name filter. And we don't need to filter over the tweet text, so just leave it like this. All right. So now usually in Vue, you would create a new attribute here and call it filters. And then you would just add all the filters, like for example, image filter. And then, for example, you could use an arrow function to define the actual filter. But we're going to use the same filter in multiple components. So what we're going to do is we just map this filters to our filters module. And we need to import this from filters.js. Okay, now we have imported our filters from our filters file, which is this one, and we have applied all the filters that we need. Now we're going to do the same thing for our tweet.view file. We import our filters. Now, since we haven't defined any filters yet, let's do this. So the filters which we're going to need are filters.userFilter, and we'll take a tweet as an argument. And the screen name filter. And the image URL filter. The image filter. And the date filter. All right. So basically we have to do what we did in our addData function and move all this stuff into our filters, which is a much more elegant solution than having to use the addData method. Because if we do this, we have to redo this for every tweet that we get, every time we change something. Also, these elements are not bound directly to their original values. So it's not like if we change this here, it's going to affect this. So this is a problem. So using filter is a much better solution. So what we're going to do is, let's start with our user filter, and we just return the value that you want to have. So let's return here just tweet.user.name. And if we do this, the filter, the filter will return the name of the user right here where we've bound our variable. Now there's a small caveat here, because it could be that the tweet that the user has sent is not an actual tweet. It could also could be a retweet from different user. So in this case, we don't want the username itself. We want the username of the user who created the original tweet. So we have to check that first. So there's an attribute called retweeted status. Tweeted status. And if this exists, we're going to get the actual username of that user. And if it's not retweeted, we just use our own original username. Next, we use the screen name filter. And it pretty much does the same thing. We just prepend our @ and copy this and edit here. And just change this to screen name. And that's it. Next, we use the image URL filter. So Again, we're going to use this part because we need to check if the user has actually retweeted a tweet. If he has done that, we need to use the original picture of that user. Alright, for our image filter, we need to use plain HTML. So we're going to use this part that we have already created in our addData function and return this. And since we need the URL of that user, oops, I forgot something here. We're going to use the function that we have already created. So something like this. Okay. Now the last thing is the date filter. And for this we can pretty much use the code that we already created and just return the result. Now, as you might remember, we moved our dateDiff function into our new utility module, and we have to import that first. So let's do that. Import util from util.js, and now we can use util.dateDiff. All right, so far so good. I'm gonna start our server now. And let's see if the app still works. Wow, that's a lot of red arrows. So let's see what's going on. Unexpected token, expected a comma. Now this is weird. So it's somewhere over here. Oh, I see it. Let's see. Still an error. Looks like something's wrong here in our filters module. Yes, that's an S too much. And enter search term. So we get our search results, but there is an error here. So let's see what it is. Okay. So we were still trying to call our addData function, which does not exist anymore. So let's remove this. And we can also remove the addData function itself. Let's refresh. Yeah, that looks good. Oh, actually not. So we're not only getting a pretty nasty error here on the right, looks like the screen name is also wrong. So let's see what's going on here. Date is not defined. All right. We have moved that function. We need to call util.dateDiff. So let's refresh. Okay, so that's good. We get our time difference since the tweet has been tweeted. And now let's check out why this is undefined. So it should be here. Screen name filter. Status user screen name. Twitter user dot screen name. And refresh. Yes, now it looks good. All right. Now there's just one more thing I'd like to change here, which is if the tweet has been retweeted, we want to show that it has been done so. So we're just gonna type here into the screen name retweeted by, and then we're gonna add the name of that actual user, which is this one. Let's save it and refresh. So let's see if we can find the retweet. Yes, there's one. See? This is a retweet. And so this is our retweet. And so is this. Okay, good. Now, another thing I'd like to change before we actually start the authentication process is, where is it? Yes, here. Remember, when we received our results from our search API call, we saved this to the store that we created. Then we basically emptied the array in the data value, which is here. And then we copied the result into this array. And now this is not really necessary because we're using the same array here and in the store here. Both are the same arrays. So there's no need to separate this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this. And instead shorten, actually I'm going to empty the tweets array by calling splice. We start at the beginning of the array and end at the end. And then we push the data directly into our store. Now this is a much shorter and easier version than before, so let's see if it's still okay. Yes, everything is fine. All right. So let's start the authentication process with Twitter. And for this, we need to check the Codebird documentation. And there are actually some pretty nice example here. We were going to use this code probably. And they also show how to authenticate using a PIN, but I don't like using pins because basically if you use the PIN, you get redirected to a page from Twitter and you see a series of numbers and you have to type that in your app, and it's a little bit cumbersome and I don't want to use that. So what we're going to use is, where is it? Here. We're going to use a callback without a pin. This is a little bit more work, but I think it's much better user experience. So let's do that. So we are going to use our Twitter.js file, but we're going to do some changes to it. So first of all, we make a proper module and export it. And we're going to attach Codebird to our module like this. If the user starts your app, you first have to check if he is authenticated or logged in at all. If he is not logged in, Then we have to redirect him to Twitter, where he has to log in and then authorize our app. And if he has done that there, we get redirected back to our app through our callback, and we get some tokens. And with these tokens, which we're going to store locally in our app, we can log into Twitter every time without doing all this redirect every time the app gets opened. So this is not very easy to do. So yeah. Now, in order to log in our users, we need to create a user interface for him. And Framework 7 has a really nice component for this, which is called login screen. So this is it, and if I click this, we get this nice user interface, and it's all built in into Framework 7. And of course, there's also a Vue component version. Here it is, login screen. And this is basically it. Now, since we want to customize our login screen a little bit, we're going to use the HTML version, this one, and convert it into Jade. Now, if you want to do that, there's an HTML to Jade converter. And you just take this code, paste it in, and that's it. As you can see, the Jade version is actually a lot less code, which is one of the reasons why I personally like Jade. But yeah. So let's go to our home. And we're going to add our logging stream directly above our Views component. Now the reason for this is login screen is actually an own view, so we shouldn't put it into our existing views. And we're also gonna give it an ID so we can identify it later. And we want to customize it a bit. Now what we don't need is this username and password stuff, because it's not like we're actually typing username and password in our app. The user does this on the Twitter website. So we can remove this. And we're gonna type in the name of our app. And what we're also gonna do is add an image. Now I already have an image here. So this is our project. I'm gonna create a new folder, graphics, and just paste in our Twitter image, which is just called twitter.png. And let's just reference it here. And I'm gonna also give it a class name. Let's call it just twit logo, and reference our file. All right. See how this looks like. Now, when we start the app, we don't see the login screen yet because we need to explicitly call it. Now, the way you do is also described in the documentation. Here, just get the instance of your Framework 7 app, and you just call login screen. But we're not going to do this yet. We're actually doing this later because we only need this login screen when the user is not logged in. So we first need to determine if the user is actually logged in or not. So what we're going to do is a simple little trick. And the trick is we're going to try to get our timeline. And for this, we have an API call in Codebird, which is here. See this one? Status is home line. So we're just going to copy this one and add it to our Twitter module. All right. So this is probably not going to work because you can only get your home timeline when you authenticate it. But we're going to try this. And if it doesn't work, we're going to show our login screen. And if it does work, well, it's just fine. All right, so let's begin. What we need to do is what we're going to do is we check if there's an error. And if yes, we just show the login screen. Oops. And if not, we just return our results. So let's refresh. Now what's happening here is the actual call succeeded because we get it 200, but there's a chance that the authentication itself did not succeed, which makes sense because we haven't authenticated yet. So we get an error, which is 220, and it says your credentials do not allow access to this resource, which does make sense. So we need to check our reply. What was it called? Errors. All right. So reply.errors, check if that exists. And if reply.errors, if there is any error, then we also show the login screen. So let's try again. And there we go, we have our login screen. Now this Twitter image is a little big, so let's make it a little smaller. It's this one here. And we're going to add it to our styles. Oops. And we give it a width, or let's say 70 pixels, which looks better, but it's a little bit too far aligned to the left. So we're just gonna align it to the left. I think we could do this by using text line center. Yes, this looks a lot better. And we could also change the text here. Click sign in to log into Twitter. All right, so now this looks pretty good. Now what we need to do is we need to start the authentication process when we click this sign in button. So let's check this out. So we have our button here. And by default, if we click it, it just closes the login screen. But we don't want that. Instead, we're going to attach an event handler. And we call it onSign-in and define it over here. Actually, we could use ES6 syntax here because why not? And in order to show the user that we're starting to sign in, we're going to show our spinner. And then we need to start logging. So we're calling twitter.login. We don't have this method yet, so we need to create it. But we need to change something here. Remember that we changed the name of our module here from CP to Twitter. So we have to rename it here as well. All right. So let's add our login method, which will be twitter.login. And now we need to actually call Cordova to do the authentication login for us. So let's go back to the documentation of Cordova. Over here and just copy and paste this part. Now what this does is it will call the Twitter API for requesting a token. Now we need this token to authenticate later, and it will send a string as a parameter, which is going to be a callback. Now this is pretty important. This will be the callback URL that we get redirected back when the user is authenticated on the Twitter API. So we need to give this the URL that we're on in our app actually. So it's this one, since we're only using localhost here. If you deploy it later, let's say in a PhoneGap app or on your website, you have to use the URL of your website or of your PhoneGap installation. Since we're using localhost here, we'll be fine with that. Now let's check in our success function. We get a reply, rate parameter, and an error parameter. Now, if an error occurs, we're just going to log it. And if there's no error, you just check what's going on in our reply. Usually we should get an authentication token and a secret. Now, these two tokens are going to be required to authenticate later in our app. So we're going to save them. And for this, we're going to create a new function, save tokens. Actually, we can just copy this. And now we need to define our new function. Oops. Save tokens. Whoops. No, what I'm doing here. All right. And we need to define our parameters. Now, what we're going to do is here, we use a HTML file local storage to save these tokens. So as a key, we use this, and this will be the value. The same thing for the secret. Now these tokens are stored in the persistent storage of our app. After we've saved the token, Cordova will redirect the user to the actual authentication URL at Cordova. Now what they do is they use window.open, which will create a new tab, but I don't really like it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this authentication URL and instead use just location.href and redirect like this. So using this method, we don't get a new tab. All right, so refresh. Okay, so I'm clicking on sign in now and join the loading spinner. So great. Now as you can see, we're on the Twitter authentication page. We're not in our app anymore. And on this page, we need to log in with our username and password. And now I just need to authorize this app, which means I'm telling Twitter that it's okay to use my Twitter account with my app. So I'm going to click this one. And as you can see, I've been redirected back to our app on localhost. But what's new now is we get a new token and a token verifier as parameters. So in order to use these, we have to fetch these parameters from our URL. And to do this, I found a quite handy function which is called query string. So we're going to put this into a new file. Now, I didn't write this code on my own, I just got it somewhere from Stack Overflow. But what this basically does is it will use the URL and extract the get parameters from it, which we're going to need. So let's go back to our Twitter module and import this. Import query string, whoops. Actually, I think this is capital Q, right? Yes, it is. So next, we have to obtain our new tokens and save it to a variable. All right. So when both of these parameters exist, we know that we got redirect back from our authentication process. So we're going to check for that if this one exists and this one exists. We're pretty much ready to go. And if not, we're going to do our check once again. So just move this in here. Okay. So now that we have our tokens, we have to first reinitialize our codebird, which means we have to set our tokens once again. Because remember, when we got redirected to our Twitter page and came back, all our variables and everything that codebird had stored will be gone because we have left our website and came back. So we need to redo this. Now we don't have a reply object here, but as you remember, we have saved our tokens to the local storage. So we can use this to get it back. And do the same thing for the secret. All right. Now CodeBird is reinitialized with our tokens. Next, we have to use our verifiers and do the final step for authentication. And for this, CodeBird also has a API method, which is over here. So it's this part, which I'm going to copy. All right. So let me just remove this comment. Not going to need that. So as you can see, this CodeBird call requires a verifier. And yeah, we got a verifier now from our get parameter over here. So we're going to replace this with this. And we're going to check if there's an error. If we do that, if yes, we're just gonna display our logging screen once again. And if there's no error, everything is fine. We can save our tokens once again, because the new tokens that we get here from our reply are different to those that we got before. So these are different to these. So we need to resave them. And then we need to go back to our home page in order to get rid of the locking screen. So I'm just gonna do this equals slash. All right, so let's try this. Okay, now before we go on and test our call, there's one more thing we need to do. If this authentication verifier does not exist, there is a chance that we have already logged in before, which means we already have logged in a different session, like let's say the day before. And if this is the case, we might be able to use the stored data from our local storage that we have used here before. And then we're just totally fine and we don't need to do anything else. So we're going to check this over here. So if our local storage.get item, this does not exist, or the secret does not exist, then we can show our login screen. Now the problem here is that we can't call this login screen function unless framework 7 has already been initialized. So we need to wait for DOM content loaded, which we're going to do like this. And since we're using ES6, we're going to use an error function here. And just paste this over here. All right. So if this does not exist, we can show the login screen. But if it works, which means if both the authentication token as well as the secret exists, we can already get our homeline status call. So just cut this into our else part. All right, so let's test if this works. Go back to our page, refresh, and there we go. Sign in, authorize. Now we are back in our app. And here we go. We get an array with all the tweets from our home timeline, which we have printed over here, the reply. So this is the whole workflow. Now, the second time we open our app, so let me just refresh it. Now, see, we're already logged in because we have saved our tokens into our local storage, and we don't need to reauthorize all the time. So this is just a one-step thing that you need to do. And when the user has done it, you're just fine and you're logged in and everything's good. All right. So the next step is we need to display our tweets in our user interface. Now, unfortunately, we are already displaying all our tweets from our search over here. So we need to move this into a different page. And we're going to do this by creating a new file. I'm just going to call this search.view. And copy just most of the stuff from our home view file, which is pretty similar to what we're going to do in our new search component. We don't need the logging screen, so let's remove this. Pretty much the only thing we're going to need is the page itself. So remove this part. All right. And we're also going to set an ID for this. And give it a name. Now we also want to use a backlink because if we go to this page, we need a way to get back. So let me remove this search bar because we're not going to need it here, and instead use a navbar and set the backlink. We want the transition to slide, and we give it a title. Next, I'm going to give this list a class so we can style it. And the rest is pretty much the same. There's not much to change here. In this component, we don't need the Twitter API, so I'm going to remove this. And also, we don't need the self reference. We give this component a name, which will be search results. And we're going to use the store again, but we don't want to conflict the tweets from our home timeline with our search results, so we're just going to rename it here. And we also need to set the new name over here in our data binding. We don't need our created function. We are going to use these same filters that we have already created before. And the only method that we're going to need is actually the onClick method, which is defined over here. And the rest can be removed like this. Also, I'm going to remove the styles. All right. Next, I'm going to create a new route. And in this route.js file, I need to define where you actually can find the component that we just created. So the path will be just search, and we're gonna map this to our new component, search results. All right. Now we need to just tell our app that we want to change to our new search page when we do a search. Now, in order to do this, we need our view, which is the Framework7 view, which is this one, the main view. And the reason for this is we can use DOM7 with a little trick here. Now, DOM7 is the template engine, which is built in directly into Framework7. And what I'm doing here is a little trick to get the actual view that we need. And the reason for this is we need the router, which can be accessed to from the main view. And using the router, we can redirect the user to a new page, which will be our new search component page. All right, so let's test this. So we're already getting error here, so let's check this. Can't find module search.js. Oh yes, it's search.vue, not search.js. Okay, let's test this. Okay, we get another error in home.vue. Corporate. This is not right. Let me check this. Ah, yes. We have to. Yes. We need to call this twitter.corporate. Alright, so in the background you can already see that our new tweets from the search have been accessed, but we're still getting error here. And the reason for this is one, I think I did a little typo here. So let's try again. Still not working. Why not? Oh yes, I forgot. Whoops, what the heck? I forgot to define here my main view ID. Alright, so let's test if this works. Refresh our page and search. Yes, so now we get our search results on a different page, and we can click the back button and we get back to our home page. So now we have some space here which we can use to display our actual tweets from our home timeline. And for this, it's actually pretty simple. All we need to do is use the data from here, which is the reply, and save it to our store. And to do that, we're gonna import our store. and remove all the tweets that we have saved there. And push in our new tweets. So let's try this. This didn't work. Why didn't it work? Oh yeah. Let's try again. And there we go. So as you can see, this is basically my timeline, which are all the people that I follow on my test account. And you can also see which tweets are retweets and which are just regular tweets. And yeah, you can click it and I get the detailed view of my tweet. I can still search and go back. And oh, this is not good. So if I press cancel, the home timeline should not be removed. So let me just fix this real quick. Yeah. So I think, oops, we don't need this. And only if a search term exists, we need to change the value here. And I think we need to rename this. And let's try again. So I'll wait until the tweets have been loaded. There you are. I click it. It's working. I search. This is working too. Go back to my own timeline and press cancel, and it's still here. Good. So much for authentication. We are now ready to post tweets, which we are gonna cover in the next episode of this series. So stay tuned. If you would like to follow me, I have a blog on timo-ernst.net. You can follow me there. I post all the new stuff about Framework 7 and Vue and everything on my blog. You can also follow me on Twitter by clicking this icon, and you will be redirected to my Twitter account. Follow me here. If you liked this video and it was helpful for you, please click on the like button, which really helps me a lot. And if you want to see episode 3 and 4, in which we're going to cover more topics about Twitter and Framework 7, especially we're also going to create a native app using PhoneGap, Cordova. Then and click on the subscribe button on YouTube here, and you will get notified when there's a new episode up. And yeah, that's it so much. Thanks a lot for listening, and see you in the next episode. Bye.